that I've ever come by. Dive deep with me into the depths of the unknown with these three true paranormal stories. Number 65. True, scary, paranormal story number one, the entity in the doorway. When I was about 19 years old, I went to visit my girlfriend Valerie. One night, it actually got pretty late, around 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock a.m. So that's when her parents decided to let me spend the night, but only if we promised not to lock the bedroom door, since we weren't married yet. She lived in a two-bedroom, small, older house. There was a hallway in between both rooms with the restroom in the middle. We got ready to go to sleep, and I made my bed on the floor while Val was going to sleep in her own bed. I was laying on the floor right next to Val, with my head about a foot away from the bedroom door. After we pillow talked for about an hour, I noticed that she started to fall asleep. That's when I decided to go to sleep, and I began to slowly doze off. That's when I heard someone walking in the hallway towards the bedroom we were sleeping in. It was pitch dark in the room. They didn't have carpet in the room. Rather, it was wood panel floors, so I could hear the floor creaking. I figured it must be her parents checking to make sure we were not sleeping in the same bed together. Then the doorknob slowly turned and the door opened with a creaking noise. I kept my eyes closed, hoping that her parents would leave once they saw that I was asleep on the floor. I was surprised when the door stayed open. Whoever it was, or whatever it was only inches away from my head. I was beginning to get worried and confused because whoever it was not leaving the doorway. I felt as if I was being watched. When 10 minutes passed, that's when I could no longer fake my sleep. I was beginning to truly get scared. Then something happened that I will never forget till this day. I heard a low, long growl. I could feel my heart beating through my body. The room got extremely cold at that moment. Then finally, after about 15 minutes of torture, the bedroom door slowly shut. It took me about an hour or so just to fall asleep. The following morning, I asked Valerie's parents if they checked on us the previous night, and they said they never left their bedroom. That's when I got goosebumps all over my body, and I knew it was something paranormal. To this very day, I cannot explain what happened that night, and what made that growl, and what was it doing the whole time it was standing in the doorway. Scary, true, paranormal story number two, chased by a UFO. In 1965, me and my father were coming home from our Wednesday church service. We were driving down a long stretch of road. We were headed to our house in the country area. It was about 10 o'clock p.m. We were pretty tired and were just trying to make it home. While we were driving, I happened to look up and noticed a flickering red and yellow light in the sky. I looked harder, and that's when I noticed it was slowly moving. It was about 2 miles away or so. I showed my dad, and he gazed up at it, and we were wondering what it could be. I told him it looked like a UFO. That's when it quickly vanished. But about 5 minutes later, while we were driving on the same road, we noticed the same light flickering, but this time it was in the middle of the road. I couldn't believe my eyes what I was seeing. It was just sitting there. As we drove closer, our jaws dropped in amazement because it was clear to us that it was an actual UFO. A real UFO with the brightest lights I've ever seen, circling around the spacecraft. We were parked there in front of the UFO, not moving at all. I told my dad, what do we do? Because it was literally blocking us from getting to our house. After sitting there for a couple of minutes and not saying anything, my father did the unthinkable, something that I will never forget to this day. He slammed on the gas straight towards the UFO. The car went full throttle and drove straight towards the spacecraft that was just sitting there in the middle of the road. I thought we were going to crash and die. Just seconds before hitting the UFO, it launched up in the air and took off. I do not know why my dad did what he did. The truth is, we could have literally died that night. As we were racing home and were almost about 2 minutes away from our house, we noticed the same UFO popped up right behind us and was following us. Then it took off in front of us and left us behind. As soon as we made it home, we noticed the UFO was hovering right above our house. We were wondering, how did the UFO know that we lived there? Even though we lived in the country, there were other houses in the area. My dad told me to stay in the car. As he got out of the car, he slammed the door and ran into the house to get his gun. I was petrified as I was staring up at the UFO. While my dad was inside the house, I rolled down my window and I looked around, and that's when I saw 3 or 4 human-like creatures standing around the bushes that surrounded our house. My father came outside with his rifle and started shooting at the UFO. That's when I got out of the car and told him that there were creatures around the bushes that surrounded our house. While my father was still shooting at the UFO, it flew directly up into the air and vanished. We rushed inside and locked the doors. My father called the sheriff's department to tell them what had just happened that night. But that same night, we had to make a statement on what happened regarding the UFO. To this day, I do not know why the UFO chose to mess with us. At night, I always wonder, what if those creatures would have gotten a hold of us? Or what if the UFO would have actually attacked us? This I may never ever know. Scary True Paranormal Story number 3. The Club. This story is one of my own, and it is a very scary, true story. My dad told me this a long time ago, and this story has never left my mind, as it is one of the scariest things I have ever heard. This took place in Corpus Christi, Texas in the 1950s. My dad said his dad, my grandpa, played accordion as a side job and was pretty good at it. He was outside his house playing the accordion around evening time when a man came by and introduced himself as John. He said he was in a band and played nightly at a nightclub in Corpus Christi. He said that my grandfather played really good accordion music and it sounded really nice. He wanted to know if my grandpa wanted to come out to the nightclub the following night and that he would also get paid for it. My grandfather was really excited about the job offer and agreed to it right away. The man told him to make sure he's there at 2 a.m. sharp. My grandfather found it pretty strange that he had to be there at the club so late, but he didn't ask any questions. The following night, my grandfather showed up to the dance hall exactly at 2 a.m. He was dressed really nice and had his accordion strapped around him. He said that as soon as he walked into the nightclub, he felt a strange, weird feeling as if everyone was looking at him. Everyone was dressed in suits and tuxedos. Music was playing and everyone was drinking and having a really good time dancing. He made his way to the side of the stage, and there he saw John, the man that invited him to come to the club. John saw my grandfather and walked up to him and asked him if he knew what song they were playing at the moment. My grandfather said yes, he did know the song and knew how to play it. So my grandfather got on stage and began to play his accordion. But he said, about after 2 minutes of playing the song, he noticed that something didn't look right with John, the singer that was on stage at the time. He looked down at John's feet while he was singing, and to his shock and horror, John had goat feet. After seeing this, his whole body went cold. He quickly looked at the other band members and noticed that they had chicken feet. He stopped playing the accordion and looked around at the people dancing, and they all had animal feet and legs. Some people had goat feet, while others had chicken and pig feet. My grandfather was petrified. He couldn't move. Just then, he said the music stopped and everyone noticed that he knew how they looked. Everyone stopped dancing and they all stopped moving. They all looked at him with straight, serious faces. That's when he jumped off the stage and ran towards the door. He said he could hear everyone laughing at him. He finally made it out of the dance hall and ran all the way straight home. When he got home, he told my grandmother everything that had happened to him. The following morning, he went back to the club with some friends to show them where all this took place. And to his surprise and horror, the doors and windows were boarded up. The place looked run down and was falling apart. My grandfather was confused. He later found out that there was a fire years prior that burned down the dance hall, taking the lives of everyone that was there that dreadful night. Hi there, and welcome to Master of Horror, where I give you the scariest, true paranormal stories that I've ever come by. Please enjoy these two true, scary paranormal stories. Number 64. Scary true story number 1. My mom's doppelganger. I have an open mind, but I don't buy into things that easily. Most things that happen, I blame on my mind, playing tricks on me, or sleep deprivation, or simply the fact that it could be a mental illness. There is one moment, though, or I suppose a few moments, that have been on my mind for some time now. While I was in the shower one day, and as water poured over my head, I heard my brother yell my name. Stacy. Stacy. The second time was louder than the first, as if something was wrong. I could have sworn I heard my dog barking as well at the same time. Annoyed but concerned, I got out and cracked the door open, then called back to him, but after waiting a few seconds, there was no response. I quickly dried myself off and put on my robe, then headed downstairs asking what he needed. However, I still got no response. My dog was on her bed, fast asleep, and my brother was nowhere to be found. I looked out the window, and their car wasn't even there. This wasn't the first time my mind has decided to play these annoying games, so I didn't really think much of it. I've had auditory hallucinations before, none to that degree, but maybe they're getting worse, I thought. That's my way of trying to reason with myself, and it worked. The next time that I heard my brother yell my name, calling for me loudly, I thought I was genuinely going crazy. I decided to bring it up to my brother while playing Borderlands one night. We talked about our mental health a lot because our parents don't believe in therapy, so we kind of became each other's safe haven. I explained everything that's happened over the past month, and instead of giving advice or sympathizing like he usually does, he just gets really quiet for a second until he says that he's been having the same experiences as me. Except it's been our mom yelling his name, but she's never even home when it happens. He goes to check, and no one's there. This was about a month ago or two, but he also thought his mind was playing tricks on him. It seemed after that talk, things began to stop. I didn't hear anything for almost 3 weeks, but then something happened that I'll never forget to this very day, and I will probably never have an explanation for what it was. I was sitting in my bed, in my room, scrolling through Instagram, when my mom starts aggressively calling my name from downstairs. I've never heard her voice before. It was always my brother's, so I didn't even think anything weird of it. I was about to get up and see what she wanted, when suddenly my mom burst through the door asking me what I wanted. I didn't know what to say, but I could tell that she was annoyed by the look she gave me. She asked me again what I wanted, and I just shook my head trying to understand what was going on. Then she angrily sighed and said not to yell her name while she's making dinner, and she walked out, leaving the door open. Still in shock, I got up to close the door, but as I walked across the room, my heart stopped when I came to the realization, and I immediately ran over to the window and looked at my driveway. My mom was at work, and the car wasn't even there. I locked my door to my room and jumped on my bed. Again, there was banging on my door. I sat on my bed crying as I called my brother. I was absolutely petrified and wanted to get out of the house, but couldn't even get myself to go downstairs alone, knowing that whatever that thing was out there. My brother didn't pick up as he was at work, so I was left stuck there. I ended up locking myself in my small bathroom while I waited for either my brother or my mom to get home from work. Though I knew it would be hours, thankfully, nothing else happened until my mom got back home. I told my brother that night, and he said he never had anything like that happen to him that bad. To this day, I still have no answers as to what I was hearing and seeing, but honestly, I'm writing this and sharing it to everyone just to be able to forget about it and move on.
Scary, true. Paranormal story number 2. My childhood home.
This occurred when I was about 8 years old. My childhood home had a lot of issues with its past. A lot of deaths happened in the house prior to my family moving in. Most recently, the people that were renting it out to my mom and stepdad didn't want to live there because their son decided to opt out of life. And before that, a few murders even happened at the house. We didn't know the details, but that's what the landlord told us. I was young when my mom met my stepdad, and shortly after they met, they moved in together. My paranormal experiences didn't come until my baby sister came along, and that's when everything started. The house had 2 bedrooms, so I had to share a room with my baby sister, Rye. My little sister would never stop crying, and when I was young, I absolutely could not stand her. I remember this one night that I will never forget. She was crying for hours, and all of a sudden, she completely stopped. The room was dark, but I had a nightlight, so I could see a little around the room. I looked over, and I saw this shadowy figure hovering over her crib. It didn't move much, but when it did, it was slow and misty. I was petrified and hid under the covers until I eventually fell asleep. I told my parents the next day. They thought it was just my imagination. This happened so many more times of just waking up and seeing the figure by my sister's crib. It was nowhere else in the room. After a while of complaining about it, I ended up sleeping in my parents' room with my mom, while my stepdad slept in my room. But a lot more continued to happen. Shortly after I started seeing this figure, my stepdad lost his job. He was a hardworking man, so it really shocked my mom when it happened. He went through a rough depression because he really loved his job, and losing it must have been really hard on him. I remember him sitting on the couch all day, every day, just watching TV. One day, when I got home from school, I came in and saw him sitting on the couch, and a dark figure was standing right behind him. I remember it so clearly, just standing behind the couch. I didn't know what to do, so I just began to cry. My stepdad got up really quick and took me to the room to calm me down. When my mom came home, I told my parents that night of what I saw. Again, my stepdad seemed disinterested, but my mom seemed a little sympathetic. But no one really believed me. After that, there were a few good weeks where nothing happened, followed by weeks of this figure hanging around, usually either by Rye or my stepdad. Some nights, when I slept in my room, I'd hear a voice. It was a woman's voice. It was real deep, just talking to Rye. I never understood the words coming from it, but it terrified me every time. As Rye got older and began to walk and talk, I noticed she spent a lot more time in that room talking to her so-called friend, the dark shadow. I knew what it was. The more this figure seemed to hang around, the worse the emotions in the house got. My sister would seem to never talk to anyone else. My mom had so much anger inside of her, and my stepdad was always depressed, and I was alone all the time. Then my parents started fighting all the time, screaming things at each other. My mom hated my stepdad for not keeping down a job, and my stepdad was just a depressed mess. They seemed to fight every single night, and every night it got worse. While in my room, I even heard my stepdad telling my mom to put the knife down. But the worst time of all was when I was in the living room watching TV. It wasn't that late, maybe 8:30 p.m. or so, and my stepdad was asleep on the couch while my mom was in her room. I was starting to get tired, and I turned off the TV and walked upstairs to my room. At the top of the stairs, though, I started to hear whispering, followed by speaking back to the whispers. The door was cracked open a few inches, and I slowly walked over to look inside, just a couple of steps away from the door. I walked over to the door and I looked inside, and that's when I saw a figure, and that's when I could see Rye next to this figure, as if it was trying to lead her somewhere. I screamed, and instantly the door slammed by itself. I just stood there screaming and crying before my mom rushed out of the room. I just pointed at the door, unable to make out any words. She tried to open it, but it was locked. It was one of those cheaper ones, though, to where she could use her fingernail to open it. She pushed it open, and Rye was in the corner of the room facing the wall. My mom yelled at her for locking the door, even though Rye was way too short to reach the doorknob. Rye didn't have any sort of reaction on her face. Paranormal true stories that I've ever come by. Please enjoy these stories, and please don't forget to leave your nightlight on.
Paranormal scary true story number 1. The basement Ouija board.
When I was 16, this happened. I am now 28 years old. I never talked about this to anyone except for those that were present when this happened. This experience has scared me, and the events that took place will stick with me until the day I die. When I was a teenager, I never really talked to anyone outside of my family, and I grew up in a small town in Italy, which was completely isolated and surrounded by mountains. Being a small village, everyone knew each other. This, in particular day, was my cousin's birthday. News around the area does travel fast, so there were a lot of people there already when I got there. When I arrived, there were people jumping off the roofs into the pool. They were drinking, smoking, the usual stuff at parties. After the party died down, my cousins and I, along with a couple of her friends, stayed for a while longer. My cousin then pulled out an old Ouija board that my aunt had bought for her on holiday while she was in the United States. Back then, I really wasn't a believer of ghosts or paranormal, and I would usually make stupid remarks regarding the paranormal. But what happened that night changed everything. At that moment, I didn't believe that some board could contact anything from the afterlife. We all sat down in the living room in front of the sofa and set everything up. I got this gut feeling that something wasn't quite right about this board. I was half tempted to just throw it in the trash. When everything was ready, I was the first one to ask a question. I said, "Can you give me a haircut?" It was as a joke, just to break the tension. But the girl started getting angry at me and chastising me, and said that I could get lost if I'm not going to take this seriously. I said, "Screw this, that I'm out of here." But before I could leave, my cousin said, "But wait, can you just stop being an ass and just go along with it? It's my birthday after all." After feeling a little guilty, I reluctantly sat back down and watched them move the planchette from letter to letter. I ended up dozing off when suddenly I was snapped back to reality by my cousin screaming. She screamed so loud that I bet every single person outside of that house could hear it. I sat up and saw that she was crying, and then I noticed that her arm had been scratched. At first, I thought they were just messing with me, but then I noticed that my cousin was scared out of her mind. "I'm throwing this damn thing out," I said, as I picked up the board and threw it to the open basement door. It landed on the bottom of the steps. I then asked the girls what had happened. They said it scratched her. While I was sitting on the floor dozing off, something evil scratched my cousin. The girls then walked my cousin to her bedroom, leaving me by myself. After staring at the open basement door for a while, I decided to call it a night. I grabbed some snacks from the kitchen and sat down to watch TV. At about 2:30 in the morning, I started to get really sleepy, so I stretched out on the couch and closed my eyes. But after a few moments, I heard these painful scratching sounds, like long steel nails being dragged across wood. I got up and made my way to where the sound was coming from. I hadn't realized it, but I found myself at the basement doorway again. I opened it without a second thought, but the moment I did, there was nothing. It was just a dark, silent, motionless basement. I was way too tired for this, so I made my way to my cousin's bedroom. But to my absolute astonishment, the three of them were all sitting on the floor in a circle, moving the planchette across the Ouija board. Really? You're messing with that thing after what just happened, I said to them. They all looked up at me, but before anyone could respond, we all heard a loud cracking sound coming from the hallway. I had rushed back into the room that I had just come from. The basement door was completely destroyed, as if someone had smashed it right off its hinges, sending the pieces down the basement steps. We rushed to the basement doorway. I said, "Everyone, stay behind me. We'll all go down together." I had grabbed a candle that was resting on a dresser next to the doorway and had one of the girls light it up. Together, we all just descended the creaky steps. But as soon as we got to the bottom, I got this awful feeling that something was down there with us. Something evil. Don't ask me how, but I somehow knew that something was on the ceiling right above us. I was scared to look up, but I knew that I had to. The dim candle light revealed a dark shadow-like form above us. It clung to the ceiling like a spider. I then saw its horrifying face staring right back at me. I fell backwards and said, "Everyone, get the hell out of here now." I led the girls back up the stairs and into my cousin's bedroom. After a while of pressing against the locked door of the room that we were in, and my heart beating out of my chest and listening to my cousin's cry, I then slowly sat down against the door and dozed off. Looking back at it was a dumb decision to stay in that house. To this day, I still haven't gotten an explanation of how the Ouija board went from the bottom of the basement steps to my cousin's bedroom. I am now a firm believer in the paranormal. Paranormal, scary, true story number 2, the Ouija board. These events took place in the summer of 2014, and I had just graduated from high school. I was enjoying my summer vacation before I had to set off to college. I really didn't have too many friends. Among the few that I did have was Phil, a pretty close friend of mine. I had a hobby of going to garage sales, and whenever I would see a sign, I would usually rush to it. I don't ever look for anything in particular. I just see if anything catches my eye, and if it's within my price range, I will most likely get it. So when I stumbled upon an old Ouija board one day, I got pretty excited. I have heard about people using Ouija boards to communicate with spirits, but I wasn't sure if the whole thing was real or not. So after bringing home the Ouija board, I called up Phil to see if we could try it out and if he was down for it. And we waited until my parents and my sister were out of the house. My family went out to eat that night, and I told them that I really didn't feel like going out and wanted to get some rest. So around 8 o'clock, they left, and about 30 minutes later, Phil was at my door. We wasted no time in setting everything up. Now at this point, both me and Phil had no idea. Now, at this point, both me and Phil had no dead relatives that we had known personally to contact. So we both just wanted to see if we could communicate with any wandering ghosts. So once the lights were off and the candles were lit, Phil started to get hesitant. He said, "Are you sure we should be doing this? What if we get possessed or something?" That's when I told him, "Come on, don't be a puss. This is our chance to find out if this thing actually works. That's when he hesitantly placed his hand on the planchette. I then placed mine. I then asked if anyone was here. The planchette then slowly moved to the word yes. Phil asked me, "You're not moving it, are you?" I then told him no, that I was not. "Are you a good spirit?" I then asked. The planchette then slowly moved to the word no. I then looked at Phil's face, and he looked as if he was getting a panic attack. "I told you this was a bad idea," Phil said. Looking back, he was correct. Despite him saying this, I made a really dumb decision by continuing the game. I told him to just calm down, and nothing happened so far. Let's just see what it has to say. I then asked the spirit directly, "What do you want?" The planchette then spelled out a message: "Your lives." All of a sudden, the candles blew out and the room went dark. That's when I heard a strange thump right next to us. I bolted for the light switch and switched it on, and what I saw next chilled me to the bone. Near inches from Phil's head was a fork embedded into the wall behind him. It was the same fork I had used earlier and tossed it into the sink. Phil turned and looked at it and went crazy. "Screw this, man." I knew this was a